Hello, fair trade advocates from around the country and the world. I hope you're staying safe, healthy, happy, and sane during this wild time in our history. My name is Ben Kennard, and I will be your MC this week. A big thank you to Billy and Kylie for that introduction. Though it's not in person, this is my third annual Fair Trade Campaigns conference. And I'm so glad to be joining from the comfort of my own home, just outside of New York City, admittedly in sweatpants. But they are indeed fair trade certified sweatpants from Pact. So I think that's acceptable. And I hope you guys are doing the same at home. I've been a longtime fair trade advocate, working in fair trade retail. I've worked for the World Fair Trade Organization, and all the way to fair trade campaigns on my own campus at SUNY Geneseo. And now with my own venture, 5 North Chocolate, where we make healthy and delicious fair trade certified chocolate snacks. But enough about me, because we have an amazing lineup of speakers tonight to kick us off. The team here at Fair Trade Campaigns has worked really hard to make the content and your experience these next few days super relevant to what's happening in the world around us. So we are very excited to get started, and we're confident that you're going to learn a lot from our program this week. Our first speaker is Christine Gent. She is the WFTO Fair Trade Expert for Made 51. Made 51 is a UNHCR initiative that integrates refugee artisans into fair trade supply chains. Made51.org brings beautiful refugee-made products to the global market. Christine is also the community director for Fashion Revolution, calling for a global fashion industry that conserves and restores the environment and values people over growth and profit. Christine was previously the executive director of WFTO Asia and has worked with companies like The Body Shop as the ethical trade manager. Christine is currently on the board of People Tree Fair Trade and extremely active in her local community as a member of local green and circular economy groups. She's the co-founder of the Fair Shop and actively campaigning with and has chaired the Brighton Fair Trade Town Steering Group. With 25 years of experience in the fair trade movement, I couldn't think of a better advocate to kick us off for the 2020 Fair Trade Campaigns annual conference. Thanks, and take it away, Christine.
There are over 70 million refugees in the world today. If that was a country, it would be the 20th biggest country in the world. The refugee crisis is one of the defining challenges of our time. So I thank you for that introduction, Ben. So I'm working with Made 51. UNHCR, United Nations High Commission for Refugee, has mandate to work with 25 million refugees. When we think about refugees, we often think about them in our own communities, in America, in Canada, in Europe. But 85% of all refugees are living in low-income countries, the first immediate neighbouring countries to where the disaster has happened. These are the refugees from Afghanistan, the Burundi crisis, the Congo crisis, the Malayan crisis, and of course now the enormous number of refugees who've come out of Syria. The countries that are supporting these refugees are very often only just able to support their own nationalities without dealing with this huge influx of refugees themselves, which they so generously do. We think about refugees moving around, but unfortunately that's very, very far from the truth. The average length of time of a refugee in displacement is now 17 years. This is children who are growing up in refugee camps, children who have been born in refugee status. But there's hope. So these refugees they've all lost their homes. They're living outside their country through situation beyond their control. But the hope's there. The hope's there. And we have the millennials, and hopefully some of you are listening to us now, who believe that refugees should be welcomed, and we should be working together to find solutions and ways forward. So refugees, when they leave their country, they often carry very little with them. They leave behind them their possessions, their livelihoods, their businesses, and when they carry with them their skills, their heritage, and their culture. And amongst the 25 million refugees that UNHCR is working with, there are artisans who are able to produce beautiful objects of beauty. And with production of objects comes work, and with comes dignified work comes dignified lives. And this is where I believe that fair trade and refugees need to work together. I've been working with fair trade all my working life, and we're now working with UNHCR within the World Fair Trade Organization principles. And the principle of creating opportunities for disadvantaged producers is 100% in line with the objectives of the UNHCR and fair trade working together. So to tell you a story, here is a Tuareg, Malayan Tuareg refugee who has moved to Burkina Faso, and he's using his traditional blacksmith and leatherworking skills to make a bowl, very basic tools and skills. So these are then used to bash out this beautiful bowl, applying the leather, using the traditional leatherworking skills to create a beautiful bowl. So this bowl is then able to go out into the world as an ambassador for refugees, changing the narrative from one of pity, from one of thinking about people as people to help, as people who are contributing and making beautiful objects, and referring to their skills and expertise. So in another case, this is Burundian refugees in Tanzania. So here the traditional basketry making skills have been enhanced by taking the traditional grain sacks and taking them to bits and winding them around the coils of the basketry and making beautiful items. These are actually available been selling through West Elm in today. So in this way, May 51 is developing a platform to market products to the global market. The goals are to uplift refugees through their skills and languages, and to change the narrative, revealing refugees as talented, positive contributors. But the significant point about this model is about we always work with what we'd call a fair trade enterprise, a local ethical enterprise. So there's always an ethical enterprise and working with the refugee artisans. So working together, the refugee artisans have a fair wage, and the host community also are engaged in the process and also receive a fair wage. And by linking the two together, it enables the refugee artisans to build bridges, to build understanding and build communication between the two communities. If we were to create work for the refugee artisans with fair wages and not taking into account the local community, it could potential to create friction and conflict in the community. And that's why we also have to have unique products. So every product is a unique product. So by creating unique products, we're creating work, we're generating income, and we're not taking work away from the host community. So it's essential that we're producing unique products. So in this way, we're keeping culture and traditions alive. So that's the model. I think it's a brilliant one. I really feel strongly that this has been worked out over a lot of time, really carefully. And we've put in some tech in order, because sometimes the refugee camps are long distance from the actual place where the social enterprise is. And this is the tools that we have to create the Made 51 collection, which is now being sold around the world. And in this way, we're able to generate, these are bracelets and earrings made by Burmese and Middle Eastern refugees who are now in Malaysia. And it's always through a Malaysian social enterprise, a unique product, building on the skills of the refugee artisans. So here are some examples. So there's jewelry, there's scarves, there's bags, there's homeware, there's cushions, there's decorative items. And I also like to mention the holiday collection. The holiday collection is, they're all individually made by different refugee artisan groups. Each refugee artisan group makes its own item, which is then put into collection, and the retailer is then able to choose 10 items they like most from the larger collection, and each one of which is sold with its own story into each individual customer, changing the narrative around refugee artisans. So we don't do this on our own. We have help from some partners who help us with the legal side. WFTO is contributing significantly on the due diligence and enabling us to make sure we have fair trade standards throughout the production. So in this way, we're able to change the role of refugees to contributors, to individuals, to be powerful. So we'd like to call you. Please sign up, go onto the Made 51 website, join us and follow us on our newsletter. Connect us where you can to wholesalers and distributors. We need those connections. Campaign with us. World Refugee Day on the 20th of June. Campaign for fair trade for refugees. And then support the incredible craftsmanship and powerful stories of these refugee artisans. Thank you very much. With that, I'll wish you a very fine conference, and I'll hand over to Elizabeth.
Hello, I am Elizabeth Segran. I am the author of an upcoming book called The Rocket Years. Just give me 1 second to set up my screen. Hi, yes, so it's really, really wonderful to be here today. Thank you, Christine, for that wonderful presentation. I am going to talk to you about something a little bit different. Christine talked a little bit about the work of fair trade. I would like to take a few minutes at the beginning of this conference to talk about you and your passion for fair trade and how you can incorporate fair trade into your life and into your future in significant ways. I am the author of a book that's coming out on the 31st of March. It's called The Rocket Years. And it's about how the big decisions we make in our 20s impact the rest of our life. I am just really fascinated with this topic. I've spent the last 2 years looking at the big decisions that we make in our 20s, from everything from career to activism, to relationships, to marriage, to things like faith. I've spent 2 years looking at a lot of social science data about how these decisions play out over the course of our life. And the reason that I have this title, The Rocket Years, is because I really think that when we're in our 20s, we're kind of like rockets that have just taken off. And while we're in our 20s, any change in our flight path doesn't really feel like that big of a deal, right? Whether you date this one person or another, or whether you quit a job, or pursue it, right? These decisions at the time don't really feel like they're that significant, but 40 years from now, they're really the difference between landing on Moon or Mars, right? And I think that a lot of young people today are deeply aware of this. They're actually concerned about the decisions that they're making and worried about where these decisions are leading. Because the truth is that our generation, millennials, people in their 20s and 30s now, we have more choices than any other generation in history. We can choose so much about our futures, right? We can choose what kind of, who we marry, if we decide to have children at all, what kind of career to pursue. Even 1 or 2 generations ago, people didn't have these choices. And so for us, we're living in this universe where we have so many options about our future. And that can feel very empowering at times. But sometimes it feels a little paralyzing too, having to make so many decisions. And so in my book, what I'm really trying to do is help you think about what it is you want in life, what is important to you, what really matters to you. Because this can be kind of a guiding light as you make decisions in your 20s. And when you know what it is that really matters to you in life, you can then kind of chart a course to pursuing that. And I know that if you're here today, if you're paying attention, if you're listening to this, to these talks, you're somebody who is really, really passionate about playing, a role in helping people in the world. You're concerned about the state of the planet. You're somebody who cares a lot about social justice. And so the question now is, what can we do in these years to create a life for ourselves, not just now, but in the decades to come, that is full of this kind of activism, and allows us to pursue these passions for the rest of our life. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. But before we enter that part of the talk, I just want to kind of acknowledge the situation that we're in right now. We're doing this virtually because we can't be together right now, because there's been this cataclysmic event that has happened, right? The coronavirus pandemic, and it's happening very quickly. And I think that in my conversations with lots of people in their 20s and 30s, there's a lot of confusion and anxiety right now. And I think that I want to just start off by saying that it's okay to feel however it is you're feeling right now. There's a national emergency. There are very momentous and historical things that are happening around us. There's a death toll that's rising. But at the same time, a lot of you are experiencing smaller disruptions that are upsetting and frustrating. Many of you were not able to finish off your semester in college. If you're graduating, you're worried that commencement might be canceled. You're separated from your significant other. You're at home where you weren't expecting to be. I just want to acknowledge that these anxieties and frustrations are real, because as young people, you may not be particularly anxious right now about the fatality of the coronavirus in your own life. And so your job right now is to keep other people safe by staying at home and being part of this movement of social distancing. But that doesn't mean that your life hasn't been changed in a really significant way. And actually, for a lot of us who are younger, the events that are about to happen, the potential recession could have a major impact on our futures. So I just want to start off by acknowledging that. And I think that it's relevant to my book and to the issues we're talking about, because we're in a moment in history right now where we can make decisions and we can make choices now that will have an impact on the years to come. And we're experiencing a lot of chaos, right? So let me just start out by addressing some of this chaos. I think to start with, it's important to remember that every generation in their 20s has experienced some of this chaos, some level of chaos. Because I think that one of the big tensions in our 20s is between, on the one hand, knowing that we need to make good decisions for our future, and on the other hand, feeling a desire to be impulsive and to make our mistakes and to sow our wild oats, right? Those are the two tensions that most of us experience when we're young. And I actually think that those are not conflicting experiences, right? Because in order to make good decisions, you need to know who you are and what the world is like. And so, going out there and being impulsive and experiencing some of that chaos is actually very valuable, because it can teach you, if you let it can teach you a lot about how you react to the world, who you are, what kind of person you are, what you stand for, what matters to you. And so I think this is a relevant concept right now, because I think a lot of you are experiencing chaos. A lot of you are experiencing these things that are happening in the world. And, while, we're not in the business here of trying to find silver linings in an experience that is horrible, right? But what I would say is that I think it's possible for us to try and harness some of the chaos that we're experiencing. We're in a moment now where a lot of, big things are happening, and we're experiencing a lot of emotions. I think you should let those experiences wash over you. But while you're in that moment, maybe spend a second checking in with yourself and seeing, how are you reacting? What is most concerning to you right now? What are you most worried about? Who are you most concerned about right now? How are you relating to working from home? Check in with yourself and see what you're discovering about who you are right now, because you're not going to be in this period forever. We don't know how long we're going to be in this period of social isolation and social distancing, but eventually we're going to come out of this, and we're going to have to make decisions about our future. And so the things that you're learning now can be incredibly instructive in that process. Okay, so I just wanted to get that out of the way. And let's talk a little bit about, two aspects of your life that I think are very relevant right now. Because you're at this event, I know that you care a lot about fair trade issues, about social justice, about environmental justice. And so I think that for many of you, your goal is to find ways to incorporate these passions that you have into your career, potentially, and also your future activism. And so in writing this book and in doing a lot of research, I have discovered a lot of really interesting things about how these two aspects of your life play out, right? Your career and activism. And I think the goal today is to try and find ways to basically lay the foundation for a life in which you're able to pursue these passions in both your career and in the other aspects of your life, right? The activism that you do, in the hours that you're not working. So we're going to address these two things one after the other. Let's start with career. So I think that what's really interesting is that for our generation, for people in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s, the entire concept of work has completely changed. Just one or two generations ago, the main consideration when taking a job was salary and compensation. A job was really a way to, have, financial stability and a status in society. But today, the concept of work has totally changed, right? Most of us who are in our 20s and 30s, we're not really that interested in a quote unquote real job, right? We want to find our dream job. And what does that mean? It means finding work that aligns with our values and our passions and our identity. The things that we want, a job that is basically an expression of our deepest self. And because you're here today, I know that one of the things that you're going to be thinking about is whether a job that you take aligns with your values. And I think that we're really fortunate because that is a very noble thing to be able to do. And I think that actually what the data shows us is that more and more of us are actually finding work that does align on all of those dimensions. Now, here's the caveat. As I was doing research for the book, what I found is that many people actually do find their dream job, but it actually takes a lot longer than you might think it does. You know, most of us spent our childhoods, being asked to think about what it is we wanted to do when we grow up. We had career days, as early as elementary school. We had parents who told us to go out into the world and find a job that we love and that makes us happy. The thing is that for many of us, when we first enter the workplace, it can be really disappointing when the vision that we had in our heads about what it is we wanted to do with our life doesn't actually feel that good when we do it, right? For a lot of people, they might have a vision of what it is that they wanted to do. And then when they actually do it, they realize that it's not actually what they thought it was going to be, or that their skills don't actually match up very well with the actual job that they were doing, or that the economy isn't great, and so they can't get the job that they had been pursuing for so long. This was my story. I graduated shortly after the Great Recession, and my dream was to be a professor. And I went to grad school, I got a PhD, and I came out at a time when the economy had collapsed. And so this was my story too. I had pursued a dream job and it didn't work out. And I think a lot of people have this experience. For whatever reason, the job that they have in mind doesn't work out. And so what you need to do is you need to give yourself time to come around to finding that dream job. That could mean different things for different people. For some people, it might mean job hopping, taking different jobs, trying out different things. For some people, it might mean, being part of the gig economy, right? At this point, we all have opportunities to freelance in different capacities. All of these things allow us to have a lot of different experiences with work. And that is actually a blessing because it allows us to get to know who we are, get to know what our skills are like, and then really sort of figure out what this perfect match will be. So what I would say to you is that, I know that you're out there trying to find work that is meaningful to you. And my encouragement to you is to keep pursuing that. When I was looking at the data, it suggested to me that it takes about a decade for the average worker to find a job that really does make them feel deeply fulfilled. And people who keep pushing through until that decade comes, say that a lot of them, the data shows that they actually feel very, very happy and fulfilled with their jobs. Workplace surveys show that that a lot of people actually have deep satisfaction with their work, and their work actually exceeds their expectations. I want that for all of you. And so my main piece of advice here is to be persistent and to keep looking for that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was activism. I know that a lot of you are pursuing activism now in college, and you're finding ways to be active in your communities. This might be getting involved in protests. It might be getting involved in voting and getting others to vote. It might have to do with organizing and participating in nonprofits. What I would like to say is that I think that this is really, really important and valuable for you to be doing in your 20s. And why is this? Well, in my book, as I was doing a lot of research on this topic of activism, I found that actually people who invest in activism in their 20s actually have a life that is full of activism. And people who put off getting involved in various causes in their 20s find it very hard to come back and do all of that later. Why is that? Well, actually, while, when you're throwing yourself into various causes, it feels like, an enjoyable experience or, an enriching experience. What you might not realize is that actually what you're doing is you're actually picking up skills and habits. Activism is essentially learning a set of skills, right? So, whether that's something as simple as voting, right? We think of voting as something that's pretty straightforward, but actually voting is a very complex thing. It requires understanding how the process works. It involves having to learn about what, the different issues are on the ballot. It's a skill. It's also a habit, right? There's a lot of research that suggests that just voting once increases the likelihood that you'll vote again. And that's because, but what you're doing is you're setting in place a set of habits. So I used voting as an example there, but this really applies to almost any kind of activism that you're doing, whether that is, anything that you're going to learn over the next couple of days at this conference, whether this means figuring out how to travel to another country to understand what fair trade issues are there, whether that's organizing people and learning what the tools of organizing are. These are skills and habits. And the more that you invest time in learning about that now, the better you'll be at doing this in the years to come, and the more it'll be a habit and a part of your life. And I think that this is really important because what we're really talking about here is creating a life that is meaningful and interesting, and it's something that we all want, right? We are all in pursuit of our most interesting and meaningful life. And I think that what's really exciting is that when you're younger, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you have so much runway, you have so much open space and so many choices that you haven't yet made that you can sort of create this life. You can build it from scratch. So I just want to encourage you to spend a little bit of time, as you're going through all of the different panels and breakout sessions that you're going to have, to just take a step back every so often and think about what it is that you really want from life, and what really matters to you, and begin putting the building blocks in place to create that life. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited that we're having this kickoff session, and I can't wait to hear what other people at this kickoff session are going to tell us, because I know that we're in for a lot of inspiring conversations and talks today. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Zachary Rochester, and I am currently the Great Lakes Regional Fellow with Fair Trade Campaigns, and I am also the lead organizer for the Iowa City Fair Trade Coalition. I am a proud Fair Trade Campaigns geek and have been for like the last 2 years, like hardcore. I really love this stuff. So today I'm going to be discussing making connections between local government and your local fair trade campaign. I need to get my slides up here. Oh no. Okay, I think we're good. And in my heart, I am in Pasadena, surrounded by palm trees. It's nice and it's 70 degrees, so I I welcome everyone to step with me into that space throughout the rest of this conference. But Iowa's lovely too, and I do love it here. So first off, this is essentially going to be a story about how my fair trade campaign here in town has been able to make connections with our local government that we did not have a year ago. So many campaigns start off like mine did, where we kind of pluck away at our goals by way of forming our team and then working with local organizations and retailers to get community support on our effort to make the town a fair trade town. As we've been going through this, we were getting closer and closer to the point where we wanted to get involved with the city government and proposing our resolution to actually get our town to become a fair trade town. So we were thinking, how can we be the most strategic with this? So before presenting a resolution to our city council, we wanted to have in place a broad base of support within the city government that we could call on once we officially presented our resolution. So we wanted to keep in mind what would make us stand out to our city councilors and what would really get our local government excited about the effort that we were putting forth. So we wanted our campaign to be seen as something substantial and something that wouldn't be ignored. And so we took a lot of time to think about what was most relevant to our city right now, what was on the mind of the city councilors, what was on the mind of those working within our local government. And that's a very different question now, and there'd be a lot of different answers at this point in time. But throughout the last year, it's definitely been climate change. And about a year ago, or it was actually in late 2017, Iowa City rolled out a really comprehensive climate action plan. So our story is one of really bridging climate change with fair trade and having that be a really good partnership to present to local government. So like I said a year ago, Iowa City rolled out a comprehensive climate action plan. And before reading through it with this goal in mind of connecting with our city council, we found out that the climate action plan itself already had a bunch of language in it that was supporting fair trade. So it didn't say the words fair trade, but fair trade was there. It was in between the lines. So we saw our angle and we saw the approach that we wanted to make, and it was definitely through that plan. So the plan not became only to package Iowa City becoming a fair trade town as a way for the city to further commit to climate change and social justice, but we were making them realize that their language that they were already using was already supporting fair trade. So the first step that we wanted to make was scoping out what departments may best align with our efforts that would help us accomplish what our resolution wanted to accomplish, and the entities within the government that were working on the climate action plan that had maybe crafted it and then were working on implementing it. So doing some digging, we remembered or realized that like a year prior, our recycling coordinator or the recycling department in Iowa City had actually held a screening of True Cost. And for a lot of us in the fair trade realm, we've seen this film, we've done screenings of it ourselves. So that was kind of like a ding, ding, ding that, okay, somebody over there is definitely resonating with the same types of values as fair trade and is probably going to be friendly towards our efforts and our attempt to try to make Iowa City a fair trade town. So at that point in time, we reached out to Jane Wilch, and she is the director of the recycling department in Iowa City. And we were able to meet with her and kind of share our work. And she was actually really excited. Most of her work has to do with sharing recycling and upcycling within the community. And ethical purchasing is something that she really cares about deeply. So she was really excited that this work was being done in the community. So from there, we were not only able to get a great partner that was willing to invite us to participate in events, which helps us get our campaign goals met, but we were also able to get connected to the city's sustainability department. So prior to meeting with Jane, it was really difficult for us to get a hold of the sustainability director. Her name is Brenda. And we sent emails, couldn't get back, couldn't get in touch. And we were kind of like, man, what do we got to do to get a hold of this lady? And Jane was able to just send an email being like, hey, this is really great work going on in town. And right away, we got the response back and she was like, oh, this is really great. And so that was able to connect us to the sustainability office, which works with the climate action plan and helps craft it, but also was an entity in town that sends out like a monthly sustainability newsletter. So we were able to, we're in talks now. It hasn't gone out yet, but we're hoping that we can have a little blurb in that sustainability newsletter each month to help raise awareness with the community. So next, and while we were working with Jane, we were really, Jane and Brenda, we were really trying to make the connection that our fair trade campaign in town was really super resonant with one of the main sections of the climate action plan, which was implementing a sustainable lifestyle. So in red here, you'll see my little floating light bulbs going off as I was reading through the climate action plan. And this was like kind of the case I was trying to make. is that all these targets that the sustainable lifestyle section make already perfectly aligns with fair trade. All we have to do is add the language in there so people know that they're already being encouraged to participate in fair trade. So changing consumption habits from conventional commodities to fair trade products can really make a huge impact at a local level to help combat climate change, because we know that we're having human rights protected. We know that environmental stewardship is already part of the fair trade process and becoming fair trade certified. And this actually gives our community members a really actionable step to make. And sometimes that can be really hard. So saving energy is one of them, reducing waste is one of them, but just choosing a different type of coffee and choosing a different type of tea is another thing that people can do to really feel connected to a global climate action movement. And so we were really excited to share that with them. From there, our next target was trying to get in touch with the people that were actually implementing the climate action plan in Iowa City. And that just happens to be our Climate Action Commission. Luckily for us, we have a great connection in the Climate Action Commission. His name is Stratus. And Stratus is actually the sustainability coordinator at the University of Iowa and has been helping the students there with getting their resolution passed to make the University of Iowa a fair trade university. So that was a really easy connection, but that commission solely focuses on the actions that need to be taken by entities and by individuals within our community. So encourage the purchase of local products and responsible purchasing. Usually when we talk about fair trade, the only red flags that come up are, well, we want to make sure that we're supporting local. And Iowa City is a community that really cares about supporting local farmers and artisans and artists. And that does not have to be an either or kind of thing. And it says it right here, purchase of local products and responsible purchasing. So of course, for commodities like coffee, bananas, tea, chocolate, sugar, a lot of those low-hanging fruit types of products that we talk about within fair trade campaigns. This is Grover. He also loves fair trade, virtual conferences. You can't avoid cats. But the responsible purchasing is a really key component because this allows our city to encourage local action with a global impact. So purchasing local when we can, and then purchasing fair trade when the local products aren't available is hopefully something that we can get implemented into our city's climate action plan. And once a resolution is passed, that can really transform the approach to the sustainable lifestyle component because it gives our community members a really tangible way to make an impact, to change habits, and to get more connected with what's going on with our global food systems. Another reason it resonates so much with our city or our community here in Iowa City is that so much of our, Iowa feeds a lot of the world and feeds a lot of livestock, and a lot of this farming components of our state's community is really intricately connected to our global supply chain. So getting people to be more aware of fair trade and where they can purchase more responsibly is a huge opportunity for us here too, and connecting it with climate change as well. So how do we package fair trade through the lens of climate change in our local governments is a really good question. So many other cities across the nation now have climate action plans or something similarly worded that they want to utilize to address climate change at a local level. And we see that our institutions globally are really slow moving. So we need to have ways that we can make changes here in our local communities that make us feel empowered and make us feel like we're doing something. And institutions like universities and local government are a great way to do this. So the first step I would recommend is taking a look at what stuff does your city already have in place, whether it be through human rights, a human rights department, sustainability, or a climate action plan. Sift through those documents that might otherwise be boring to read, but see where there's resonation or where things are resonating with fair trade language. Anytime there's anything that's said about protecting of human rights or true sustainability or environmental stewardship, all of that stuff is fair trade language, and there is a way for us to package the work that we do with fair trade to the work that is already being done in our local governments. And next, we don't have to look much further than all of our resources on the Fair Trade Campaign's website. So as a campaigner, both on a university and in a town, and as a regional fellow right now, I come to these all of the time because these documents all lay out for coffee, for sugar, for flowers, for tea, all of those 101 documents, the need for fair trade, how the fair trade products differ from conventional products, and most importantly, how for this topic, how fair trade also backs up environmental stewardship, and how climate action is already inherently tied into fair trade. And historically, a lot of people definitely think about human rights and worker compensation when they think of fair trade. But we really have a great opportunity as fair trade advocates now to really expand the consciousness around what fair trade is, because it's so intersectional. Fair trade covers all the points on almost any justice movement. We're climate justice, we're environmental justice, we're human rights advocacy, and we're worker justice movements. So it's all encompassing. And I think that we have great opportunity to connect global movements to really tangible things that our community is doing. And becoming a fair trade town is a really great way for towns also to put forward their values and commit to something that their community can really be excited about getting involved in. So that is all I have for today, but I really am excited for the rest of the conference. Please reach out if anybody has any questions. And one last thing that I'll plug is that if you are a campaigner right now, and this will look very different between our scales of cities. Obviously, Iowa City is much different than like making Fair Trade LA happen. But reach out to your Fair Trade fellow. If you're wanting to reach out to local government and aren't sure how, have reached out to local government and aren't quite hearing back, or things are kind of rocky, we are here to help you. We are here to support you. And we love talking to our campaigners. So never hesitate to reach out, and enjoy the rest of the conference, and stay cozy as we all hunker down in our respective forts.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So it's great to be here with all of you today. I hope that everybody is staying safe during this epidemic. Right now, I'm actually in Loyola County, and they have put in a shelter in place. So right now, this current, the youth climate movement, we're doing a lot of work just to take care of ourselves and preserve our energy for the future. So my name is Alexandria Villasenor. I'm a 14-year-old climate activist from Davis, California. I will be talking a bit with you all today about this current youth climate movement, what we've been doing, and how you all can get involved. So first, I just wanted to talk a bit about why I'm an activist and how I got involved. So my climate story began about a year and a half ago, when I was in my hometown when the Paradise Fire broke out. And so Paradise quickly became one of the worst wildfires in California's history. Over 150,000 acres burned, almost 20,000 structures were destroyed, and many people ended up dying and losing their loved ones. And so it was such a scary experience for me at the time. I was 13 during it. And in my hometown, the smoke from that fire was seeping into my house. I had to roll up wet towels and put them under windows and doors to keep the smoke from coming in. And so at that point, I have asthma, so it was very scary. And at the time of the fire, my mom was actually doing her master's degree at Columbia University. So I was only visiting family when the fire ended up happening. So for my safety, I ended up getting sent back to New York City from that trip back to New York City from California early. And so I remember just being really upset and wanting to understand why this was happening and why California is constantly having our wildfire seasons now all year round. So I started to research the wildfires, and I started to come across how California's wildfires are actually linked to climate change, and how climate scientists can get a climate change signal from California's wildfires. So I wanted to start to do something after seeing what's happening in my hometown. So I saw Greta Thunberg speak at COP24, and her words ended up really empowering me to go out and take action for my own future. I ended up a lot of youth nowadays, we're feeling so much climate anxiety and eco grief from everything that's happening. And so one of the ways that I learned to translate all of that eco grief was turning it into action. So I decided to go on strike on December 14th of 2018. I began striking every Friday in front of the United Nations headquarters. As of this Friday, I will have been on strike every Friday for 66 weeks. So it's been over a year now. And the Fridays for Future movement, we've since then gone through a lot this year and taking our actions to the next level. So after I started striking, I got connected with activists all around the world, and we started to plan for the first ever global climate strike that occurred on March 15th. And so global climate strikes are where all of the climate strikers, weekly ones, and just any students, we plan for these big collective actions. And we put all of our efforts into having this one day and mobilize. So March 15th of 2018 was March 15th of 2019 was the first ever global climate strike that we had, where hundreds and thousands of students went out onto the streets. Since then, we've followed it up with 3 other global climate strikes. The most recent one was on September 20th, and that was the week of the United Nations Climate Summit. So we've really focused our message on the world leaders at that summit. That week was very impactful because it was also the time where we had the first ever youth climate summit. So youth were able to go and make our voices heard. On September 20th, we had, over that entire week, we had about 7 million people striking. And so it was one of these moments that was a catalyst for future actions that we used to get our message out there. One of the main 3 demands we had was no new fossil fuel infrastructures, focusing on renewable energy, but with an emphasis on making sure all of this is equitable, being equitable, have that at the core of all of our solutions. And then the third demand for that was to have our world leaders hold corporations who are continuing to pollute our planet accountable, because we believe that those who are continuing to harm our planet should be held accountable because they are violating our rights. And so that was the last action we did. But now the youth climate movement, we are starting to focus on our next actions and what we can really do to have an impact, especially now that it's 2020, the decade of youth. And so we need a decade of action for us now. So the next day that we are going to be working full force on is Earth Day. Of course, with this current epidemic that's happening, we want to make sure that the youth climate movement is safe and that we are protecting ourselves. So we will be having it entirely online during this time. And the movement will be using this time to build community and relationships and plan for the future. One thing that we are doing, especially to continue growing our relationships, is a lot of the youth, we are having Zoom party calls. So a couple days ago, actually, they happen almost every night. All of these youth from different organizations in the climate community are having these Zoom parties where we get on it and we just talk and organize and talk about the future. So there was one where we had over 80 people on a Zoom call, and it was very hectic and chaotic, but we ended up meeting a lot of new people and growing our connections with each other. There's a sense of community that we're getting out of this. So that was, the youth climate movement is going to continue to do that and continue to grow. And what we're really starting to focus on as well during this time is education. So one thing that I focus a lot on is climate education. After spending a year organizing for climate action, I saw that one of the largest barriers to getting people involved is because they don't understand why it's important or why they should be protesting or going on the streets. Many people don't understand the climate crisis. So I get a lot like, what's the difference between weather and climate? And how can I make a difference in a problem that's sometimes so difficult in my everyday life, but is actually the greatest issue humanity has ever faced? So the climate crisis will ultimately change every aspect of young people's lives today, from where we live to what we do for work to if we have children. So many young people are now starting to have conversations about whether we want to have kids or not. And so it's as well, it will decide how we're educated, where we end up going to school. So the climate crisis will even affect everything in our future. So understanding the unique risks and vulnerabilities my generation will face needs to be addressed in our education curriculum and processes. I also believe that climate education is crucial in the fight against the climate crisis because in other countries, climate education and even basic education is a privilege. For example, over 72 million children who are of primary education age are not in school. However, young people in those countries who are the ones experiencing the effects of the climate crisis the most don't understand why that's happening. So even though they contributed the least to the crisis, they're the ones suffering. And that's why climate education must reach every corner of the world. So to combat this, I ended up founding Earth Uprising, where we focus on climate education. We do it peer-to-peer. One of the main campaigns we're focusing on in this upcoming year is making sure that we end up getting into schools with climate education. We can't wait till we get climate education integrated into our school systems. We don't have enough time. So directly having young people go in and educate each other, community-based, is one thing that we are really focusing on with Earth Uprising. Young people, we're also finding new ways to take direct action. So not just protesting, being on the streets, but also through legal challenges. Many young people are challenging our legal system, and that's increasing. Young people around the world are taking their governments to court for jeopardizing their future and the health of the planet we live in. I've even taken my own legal challenge all the way to the United Nations. So that week of September 20th last year, myself, Greta Thunberg, and 14 other children from around the world ended up filing a complaint to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, stating that some of the most powerful countries were violating our rights by not taking climate action. Those countries are France, Germany, Brazil, Turkey, and Argentina. And so we're really holding them accountable at the global scale. So I hope that these countries hear our call not only as a legal challenge, but as a cry for help that can only come from their children. And so that is just one example of how we are finding different ways to hold our world leaders accountable. And young people are the ones finding new ways to do this. We are continuing to really take our actions to the next level. Young people are innovators. We're using the resources that our generation has been given to take climate action because we have some of the greatest technology that we use to our advantage. Social media is such a great help because it's how you can get your message all around the world. Young people, we use social media when we're organizing for our actions to outreach. It's how we share the message of the climate crisis. It's an educational resource as well. And so technology, but we also have some of the most advanced science out there. And so young people, it makes it easier for us when we're deciding our demands and what we want to see from our leaders when it comes to the solutions. So that is just something that we are continuing to find out, and we're continuing to innovate. Young people, we are some of the greatest generation I've ever seen because of just how powerful that we can be when we make our voices heard. So one thing that I do like to talk about as well is how this movement, though, it needs to be intergenerational. So we do need adults and adult allies there fighting with us. One thing that I want to invite all of you here today to do is become a fan of the youth climate movement. So by that, I mean fund, amplify, and narrate. So first of all, why funding is so important is because a lot of young people, we are doing a lot of this, but we're doing it from our own money. So for example, there's we need people from the most affected communities of the climate crisis to be the ones up there talking about what's happening in their community. But there becomes this economic divide when those who are able to go and make their voices heard are the ones who are heard more. But we need to be privileging those who are affected the most. So making sure we're funding, getting those who are affected by the climate crisis, getting a platform for them to really talk about what's happening. The other thing, amplify, is the second one. So I want you to be amplifying the youth's calls. When we have a protest, amplify it. When we are doing campaigns, amplify us. If you know other politicians or people in positions of power anywhere, amplify us to those. And then the final one is narrate. So I want you all to find out your own climate story, how you're affected in your own community, personally, and just narrate your story. Talk about it to those who will listen, but also talk about it to those who won't listen. For example, my own personal climate story has come in it's been very important when talking to climate deniers. I've actually had one of my relatives is a climate denier, and there was one Thanksgiving recently where, she started talking about how all of the reasons why she doesn't believe in the climate crisis. And of course, it was very shocking for me to hear. So I focused on getting a foundation with any person who's a climate denier, talking about why it's important to be a climate activist, why it's important to fight for future generations. And so having that foundation is important, and then talking about how you're affected. So after telling this relative who didn't believe in climate change, talking about my future and my climate story, there's more of she's finally starting to come around and really start to see the science. So talking about how you're being affected is so important now. And so I think I invite all of you to become a fan of the climate movement, because this issue is affecting us right now and it's affecting everyone. And so we need young people, adults, everyone involved fighting for a livable planet. And so I really do believe that now is the time to become an activist. So I hope that all of you will get involved and really start to see how this is one of the greatest issues we have ever faced, and we need everybody involved out there doing anything they can to become a climate activist. Thank you.
Hi guys, this is John. Hopefully you can see me okay. Let's see. All right. Alexandria, you are truly inspiring, and I just loved the energy, and also the shout out to the intergenerational piece. Obviously, I'm a little bit older than you, got a few decades on you. I'm wondering from Elizabeth's perspective, if you're in the rocket years, I think you're like beyond that or something. I don't know what years you're in, but boy, you are a rocket on fire. So way to go. True inspiration. So I own and lead Avance Workforce Solutions. And so my company exists to enable really farmers, small, medium-sized farmers, even larger ones as well, to be just exceptionally successful. And that means, they make money, they put food on the table, but they are purpose-driven, and they take care of natural resources, they treat people really well, they're committed to their people, etc. It also exists to empower workers, farm workers, irrigators, you name it, folks that are out there pruning, harvesting, etc. And how can we take this amazing talent pool, with a huge, just amazing work ethic, but invest in their skill development, amplify their voice. Alexandria used the term amplify a ton of times. Well, where's their voice, right? And what are the structures? What are the things that need to be in place? What are the tools? What are the types of investments? How do growers do this? How do others come alongside growers to really give these people the opportunity, basically? Because oftentimes maybe they don't even speak Spanish. They speak an indigenous language, or they're hiding in fear. They're in the shadows and that type of thing. And so there's just so many avenues, and I've lived through this now quite a bit, and just see this acute need to empower workers and give them a voice. And I've been so encouraged by the work of Fair Trade and just felt so privileged to be a part of the work and see how some of the ways that we've partnered with Fair Trade has really accomplished that. And it's been so much fun. So let me bring up share and start the slideshow. Okay, so sustainable impact, that's the topic I want to talk about today. Impact is really about how are we benefiting the people and the world that we live in, but how is it sustainable? So you can do it, one day. You can help an old lady across the street, that's impact. You can treat people medically, you can keep them from harm, etc. But how does that sustain itself over time? And so really, I want to share some of these principles learned on the journey, really, at my time at Driscoll's. And so I spent about 9 years at Driscoll's. My last position there was the Vice President of Social and Environmental Impact for the Americas. It's a very large produce company, operates in 22 countries around the world, well over 100,000 farm workers in that system, hundreds of growers. Anyway, it's just an amazing company. Putting all that Driscoll's does is put amazing, awesome, delightful berries on your plate and on your salad and in your cereal. Just berries. That was it. But it's just a tremendous, tremendous company. But we were grappling with how I was in operational roles for most of the time, really about working with growers and getting the supply, getting fruit to people's homes. But we were finding ourselves on this journey of, well, how do you know that the workers are in good working conditions on these, not just hundreds of farms, but thousands of farms. And so, with an enterprise of that size, it's very difficult to know what's going on. And so, what were some of these learnings? And really, these two other things I put on here: market assurance, our journey toward what? Of market assurance, which is really about trust with customers. That would be Costco and Whole Foods and Kroger and Safeway, all these kind of folks, typical kind of retailers. How do you have trust from them? They're the ones buying the fruit in the end. But the one that's really paying the bills is the consumer. It's all of you guys. It's you at your university campus, choosing to buy berries and not a candy bar or something like that. And so, why do you want to buy this stuff? And so, having the trust of customers and consumers is completely paramount for any brand. And then, not this idea of, well, we're casting this image, in front of customers and consumers of what we stand for, et cetera, et cetera. But what's really happening on the ground? When you think about just so many communities operating, and we're talking big operations, lots of water, lots of ag inputs, tremendous amount of people, tremendous amount of efforts. But, there's the on-farm conditions and what's happening there and the people that go to work every day. And not just, is the supervisor frowning at them and abusing them in some way or something like that, God forbid. But are they bending over, to do the task that they've been assigned to do? Are they bending over to pick the fruit, or do they get to stand up? How is that fruit presented? How is the grower, producing it in such a way and presenting the fruit to where it's easy ergonomically to access the fruit? And so sometimes, when we think of positive impact, we're thinking about, the pay and benefits that people get, which is huge. But what about just the typical tasks that they perform? And, how are you setting them up for success in that way? And then, what are the career opportunities and that type of thing, advancement opportunities and what have you? So let me jump into the next slide here. And you can see, a little bit more in this image about sustainable local impact. What is that? And my first kind of big learning or key principle here is what I would explain as start with the end to end where you want. And we'll play on words there, but essentially it's like, what are you ultimately after? And so I just said that, hey, trust in the marketplace and local sustainable impact, positive impact, was basically what we were going after. But then you have to break that down and say, well, what in the heck does that mean? And so this image explains a lot of things, but essentially it's, we need to have a balance here. You have to have successful businesses, but those businesses rely upon what? In this case, we're talking about farming businesses, and they're relying on natural resources. You're not going to be able to grow stuff without good land, with good water. You're not going to be able to harvest the crop without great workers. And so there's this interdependency, and so acknowledging that, but then, being able to look at this whole picture, and because our tendency is to get into the detail and try to resolve one small component, but oftentimes we lose perspective about what that is. And then we start going down rabbit trails and do things that are counterproductive, even though they kind of seem like they're a good thing. For example, let's go audit all the growers, and let's audit them like twice a week. Let's put them all out of business and, make this whole, just add cost upon cost to consumers and add no value whatsoever. Now, audits are important. Yes, they have their place, but you have to keep it in context. It's not going to help to just go and police the heck out of farmers. That's just not going to work. And so it's like, how do you do capacity building? That's the term we use, for training growers about what does success look like in terms of how you treat your people, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's really, how do you make these farmers super successful and bring everyone along for the ride? That means not only the workers on their farms, but the local communities where they operate. Then you get into things like, what's the business model? And so you get a big company like Driscoll's, big brand. And the cool thing about the business model is that, we would look at it enterprise-wide. And that meant essentially the grower and Driscoll together. And that whole enterprise has to make money. And then most of the money goes back to the local grower, which then means, that local economy is boosted, via that those monies going into that community. Now, that doesn't automatically happen, doesn't automatically trickle down, right, and have positive impact. So that's where it's like, well, how do you empower real purpose-driven farmers and business owners that have this type of awareness to say, what, we're here not just to, put money in our pockets, but we're here to, really be enhance and benefit the community that we operate in. And so that was the idea. So you want to start with the end to end where you want. Then I would say, there's really no silver bullet. And a guy like me, I'm looking around going, okay, what are the programs? What are the ways that you achieve these types of things? And I will just tell you, there's no silver bullet. So you're thinking there is, oh, wow, that program's amazing. And there are some cool programs, and Fair Trade is one of them. But it's not like you just pull it off the shelf and off you go. There's just so many other elements. The other piece that I would point out is crawl before you walk, before you run. So in our case, it was like plugging in Fair Trade right away. It just isn't necessarily the best thing to do. It's like, we had to say, okay, what are our labor standards? And okay, let's get really clear about what those things are, and let's publish those, and let's be transparent, and let's show the world, this is what we stand for. And I'm just talking labor here. There's a million other things that we could talk about: plastics, water, climate change, you name it. But it started with the basics. Like, here is our commitment. This is about hundreds of thousands of people that have dignified jobs. It starts with that easy declaration, no, there will be a good workplace environment, and people will have a livelihood via this occupation. But you have to start with that declaration, start with those standards, and then you start working toward it. And that's, oh my gosh, thousands of trainings. It's a tremendous amount of work to get this stuff out. If you come in right away with the outside certifier, just try to jump through all the hoops of the certifier, you're going to really struggle. And so you have to have these kind of foundational capabilities. Now, oftentimes these outside folks, and Fair Trade's been a great partner, will help you get there, and that's really good. But you don't want to just run into it too quickly. So, okay, what is that? That's crawling, publishing your standards and working towards compliance to the standards. Then, you walk. So, okay, that could be implementing a Fair Trade program. Say, come on in and let's add some elements to this. Let's do some community assessments and see what the needs of the workers and the community at large is. What are the assets, of the communities? Because oftentimes, especially outsiders, have all these ideas, about how you're going to go in and help, right? And so there's a book called, When Helping Hurts. That's kind of a classic, error that people make is, come from the outside and say, we're going to bring you the solutions or drop the resources down from heaven or something. When really it's about not underestimating the assets that are already there. And in some of these places, some of these rural communities in developing countries, you go there as a Westerner or from, a developed area and you go, oh my gosh, they have nothing. Well, that's not the case. And so you got to kind of change your mindset. And part of that is listening. And I tell you, one of the most amazing assets that exist everywhere I've gone to a lot of places, are the people. And people with amazing values. They truly are giving of themselves. They're not just about, me. They care about their families. They care about their communities. And boy, the talent is it's out there. There's just amazing talent. And I know I'm talking to a lot of very talented, passionate people. And I'll tell you that, in these rural communities that, haven't had the opportunity to go to college and do all these different things that we kind of take for granted, but there is amazing talent out there. And so how do you wake those folks up and let them know that, no, you don't just need to go off and go harvest berries for the rest of your life. No, there is much more that we want you to contribute, and not just we want out of you, but we want you to come alive. And Elizabeth said it super well earlier. How do you, I can't remember everything she said. It was like all about the passion. What are your passions? What are your talents? What's your treasure? And how can we wake that up and enable you to live out your passions? And that is very true in all these rural communities with some amazing entrepreneurs. Oftentimes we don't think about farmers and what they do, but the skill set needed to be a successful farmer is incredible. You have to understand so much about science, so much about natural resource management, so much about running a successful business, and then it's dollars and cents, and it's administration, and it's human resources, and it's markets that are unstable, and you got to deal with uncertainty. But I tell you, there is amazing talent in these communities. So there's a lot more I could say about that, but I'll move on. But boy, the crawl, walk, and then run. If you can set up some structures where there's advisory councils and there's worker committees, and there's the right type of expertise that kind of say, hey, here's how you can do this, and work on this capacity building and training. The potential is endless. It is endless. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. The other piece I kind of alluded to already is embrace interdependency. We rely on one another. And oftentimes we go off into our isolation and, no, I just want to go deal with my thing and do it myself. And there's some comfort in that sometimes. But we are interdependent and we rely upon each other. The cool thing is with that, even though it's messy, right, when you have to deal with other people and what have you, there's so much power. There's so much power when, and this is kind of the next point, when you sow trust. When you make the decision to trust in others and you open yourself up and you're vulnerable with others, and you know what they have to give and they know what you have to give, and you're not possessive or whatever, but you say, you know what, let's embrace interdependency. Let's choose to trust in one another. Let's choose to believe that others have a lot more to give than maybe it seems like they do because they're not the loudest voice in the room. It is amazing the power of working together, but it takes a tremendous amount of investment and belief that through trusting one another, that translates into our greatest strength versus all going off operating independently. So that's one of the things I love about this forum is that you guys are like banding together. We're like a band of brothers and sisters, saying, hey, we're going to do this together. We're going to do civil action. I love it. They talk about civics and all these cool things. I was just so impressed with you guys. already. And anyway, so, but embrace interdependency, sow trust, and trust you will reap. So I've lived this just so much, in operational environments where, all the workers and the managers, they're like against each other. And I've just seen it time and time again in union environments and non-union environments. When I started my career at Driscoll's, there was a big mess, one of the coolers, and but it was just basics. It was trust. And so, there was a union there for 30 years, there's one place, and a few years into it, the workers were like, they didn't want the union there anymore. They're like, why? Because trust was built. And, oh, you're listening. Oh, you care about what I have to say and what I have to contribute. Why do I need a middleman to go off and negotiate for me when I can talk directly to you? And it's not about being against unions at all. I've facilitated that, freedom of association. And, hey, if you want representation, there's reasons for that. To go for it, and you shouldn't get in the way of that. So union, non-union environments, but the basis of it all is really trust. And that is very difficult. Then, this last thing here is be well. And, I think one of my key messages for you guys, as really passionate young people, by and large, and I'm sure there's others that aren't, or maybe more in not in the Rockets years, but in another phase of life, I don't know, Elizabeth, where I'm at on this one and what phase I'm at, but not the golden years, not quite yet. Don't give me that one. But be well. And so to young people, especially, being in it for the long haul, you really do have to stay encouraged. There's this amazing man, Ray Johnson, who said it really well. He goes, what my chief job is, and he's a tremendous leader. He goes, my chief job is to stay encouraged. Because he knows that otherwise you burn out, you're disillusioned, right, by politics or by, these people who just won't wake up and see what's happening in the world. And then, what can I do? I'm just one person. I would just encourage you to resist that. You will face that multiple times in your life. You just want to throw up your hands and say, I quit. Alexandria, I hope you stick in this thing for the long haul. Okay. But part of it's be well. You have to take care of yourself. You have to, we want to go change the world. I tell my kids this, I'm, 48 years old. I still want to change the world. And I am. But you got to hang in there, and you got to take care of each other, and you got to have people to lean on. You have to create safe environments, and so that's my encouragement to you guys is to be well. And just backing up a little bit there is that your life matters, more than you can imagine. Each one of you, your life matters so much in what you contribute. I just want you to hear me on that. And so each one of your lives is so precious. And so tell yourself that, remind yourself of that, starting with yourself and your immediate friends. And I tell you, people are depressed, they're suffering. They don't know anymore. Does my life matter? Well, it does. And I wish I could spend each time with each one of you and encourage you in that. But be well. And that just doesn't stop with you as an individual. It is be well as a community. It's be well as a nation. It's we have to be well as a company, as organizations. We have to be well. And you have to invest in that. You have to invest in being well. And only then really do you see true healing in the world. Are you really equipped to heal a broken world? Because that's where we're at. We live in a broken world. But it starts with you. It starts with your friends. It starts with your family. And so, anyway, invest there. That's probably my biggest message of this whole thing. But I tell you, when that happens, and you start seeing the walls come down, the barriers to progress, and when you start developing trust, and you have a commitment, not only that yourself would be well, but others would be as well. I tell you, the momentum grows, and you see things you would never imagine. You see amazing progress. Okay. How does this stuff work? Okay, this is a little technical, but this is kind of based on what we would call a theory of change. And so you can look this stuff up. It's not like I created it, but again, it goes back to starting with the end in mind. What are you really going after? And so I would call that, what are these impact areas that you're really concerned about? And so, who are these beneficiaries of whatever actions and interventions you're going to take? And so is it, hey, we want to empower entrepreneurs. We want to empower workers, give them a voice. What about these women that in certain areas, are disadvantaged in many ways, or indigenous folks or disabled folks or whatever it is? Hey, you can't do it all. You can't embrace everything. You can't go say, oh, there's 17 sustainable development goals, the United Nations. Oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. There's so many things to do. It is overwhelming. But you identify, hey, these are the impact areas. This is in our core competency, or this is within our reach, or we feel like we can take this on. You say, okay, you define what those impact areas are, and you never lose sight of that. And you break that down into what's tangible. What does that really mean? And so you put metrics to it, right? You say, this is what success looks like. And then you work your way back. It's so important. And, what are these outcomes? Okay, well, we got these worker committees are helping grow. Sometimes you see that some of these outcomes, you kill two birds with one stone. So you're like, oh, I want to help the grower be successful and the worker as well. But it seems like there's this, conflict here because, if the grower pays more, then they make less. And, it seems like there's a conflict when in reality, oftentimes there's many win-wins out there. You just didn't realize it. And so in this case, you see, in this outcomes section, worker committees are helping growers address production issues. Lo and behold, that is a solution that's a win-win where, you're teaching, farm workers, let's say, maybe a new skill set on how to problem solve. Equitable Food Initiative does an amazing job of this, by the way. You teach them continuous process improvement. You teach them what to do when something's going wrong on the ranch, and you empower them. You empower the frontline people that are close to the work to go resolve the issues, not like send it up the flagpole every time and have the owner or the senior manager, or all these guys that aren't even as in touch with it as the workers are. And so then it ends up benefiting the culture on the ranch. The different functions, the irrigators, the quality people, the food safety people, all these people that have to operate these things, they start learning how to work together more effectively and running a more efficient, productive ranch that adds value to the marketplace. But people feel like, oh my gosh, they've learned new skills. They feel like, hey, I do have a voice. Wow. It wasn't just airing my grievances. It was, I'm a productive member of this team. And, the rewards, the incentives, the financial incentives and all that should come with that, as people are adding more value. The market should pay more, as we develop or send to them quality food that is safe, et cetera. So you start with these end impacts and you work your way back and say, okay, here's an outcome that we can measure. Here's some outputs. Okay, we need trainings. Okay, well you go all the way back to the activities and strategies. You have to have resources to deliver these things. Those are the inputs. It's a very simple way to kind of look at this work. But again, this is quite technical. M&E, monitoring and evaluation, that is a technical term. They're very specialized organizations that do this type of thing. It requires a lot of tools. Anything at scale, I mean, this sounds like so simple, but boy, to pull this off at scale is very, very challenging. So, as you're young people, thinking about, okay, what does this stuff mean? What do I do? Learning these types of skills. And I would say too, not just, let's say, within the sustainability world, those kind of skills, but business skills, accounting, there's so many, the hard sciences, invest in those, skills as well. And that will make you a more effective, contributor to, really helping this come together. So let's see. Getting back a little bit to fair trade, this was in Baja last spring. Driscoll's, I was leading this effort. We went 100% fair trade, all the product out of Baja. And that is a big, big deal, because typically the way these things work is there's only certain customers that'll participate and pay a premium. Well, this is where innovation is so interesting, right? So we were a real innovation partner with Fair Trade and said, gosh, if we adjust the premiums, we do this and that and the other, and we talk to hundreds of customers, not just a couple of them, the natural food stores and these kind of folks that are sustainably minded and whatever, they'll pay it. But boy, the Walmarts of the world and that kind of thing, are they going to jump in? Well, they did. And so all those customers participate in all the products from, all the growers. So it was just really, really neat. And so that program is gaining a tremendous amount of momentum. It comes back to real people with acute needs outside the workplace. So I was talking maybe more up until now on the conditions on the farms, but these people that are working on the farms, harvesting and doing these really tough jobs, what do they go home to? And in Baja, it doesn't rain. There's no water. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but these water tanks, we distribute 1,600 water tanks. And that was so significant. I mean, I heard testimony after testimony after testimony. People are like, it changed our lives. Why? Because they deliver water like twice a week. And when the water's on, you've got to capture it. And what do you have to capture it? Some bucket? A lot of times that I'm literally, there's 50-gallon drums. I've seen all kinds of things down there. And so, this doesn't solve the water problem. And so, we're engaged in all kinds of discussions on sustainable groundwater in the area and getting into a little bit of Zachary's talk, about working with governments and that type of thing. So important, hugely important. Government relations, all that stuff, please invest in that. It's a big, big deal, especially with social services. I'm showing the dental here, health services and that type of thing. They had a heck of a time, very difficult to work with the governments, but they're so critical to work with. So on the dental side, this was, from a dental fair. So we actually had health fairs, and then the workers said, hey, we need more dental. If my teeth are, or whatever, we need help here. So we said, okay, let's do, dental fair. And the worker committee decided that, not, some higher ups like me. And so, but then it's like, okay, how do you translate that into not just some weekend fair, which is super cool because you mobilize all these, the University of Ensenada, super excited to have their students come down and learn from that as well. Really neat things. But one moment in time, it's like, no, we need continual services. And so now it's like, okay, how do we, in the process of building these community centers. And anyway, it's super exciting. But at the end of the day, it's real people with acute needs. And you got to think about the whole person, not just on the job, but what do they go home to? And lastly, to me, we're talking fair trade here, fair trade magic. What is that to me? To me, it's empowering these passionate world changers. I just love it. I mean, I take the Costco senior guys down there and meet with the committee members like Zachary, and oh my gosh, this timid guy, who wouldn't speak up or, just like this meek, mild guy. Oh my gosh, you should see this guy talk. He is this most passionate, empowered individual who's thinking big. And the cool thing too in this process is that, these people that get elected, to represent the rest of the workers, yes, they're capable people. Oftentimes they're articulate. But the thing is, there's a trust there. The colleagues, and going back to trust, right? Their colleagues, they choose people that they're not just in it for themselves, they're in it for all of us. And that's where I was saying, this tremendous talent is out there, that are self-giving, and not just about me. So anyway, I'm sorry, yeah. So I think this is just magic to me, this empowering process of developing these world changers and seeing them fly. So be well, my friends, to heal a broken world. So great to be a part of this. Thank you so much for the time.
Yes, I am. Can you see me? Perfect. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. And wherever you are, I hope you are staying well and sane and still hopeful that we will get through the crisis that we all collectively share at the moment. My name is Cynthia Buiza. I am the Executive Director of the California Immigrant Policy Center. We are a statewide, multi-issue immigrant and refugee advocacy organization that's based out of California, but have offices in different parts of the state. And, you know, I know you've been listening for a while to the speakers, to all of us speak, and it's been more than an hour and a half of listening. So I hope you still have the stamina to listen to the rest of the speakers. I do want to thank the organizers of this conference and the very generous speakers that spoke before me. You know, this is the moment where it's almost counterintuitive to resist because everything seems impossible right now. But having this conversation, even if we don't all see each other's faces and expressions, is in itself an act of resistance. So I'm very grateful that you have decided to continue to join us today. Before I continue, let me pause very quickly, also to give us a moment's pause from the conversations we've already had, and ask you to imagine something. So we work with immigrants and refugees, and Christine at the beginning spoke about the conditions that millions of refugees live in at the moment. Imagine if you're a refugee staying at a refugee camp and being told to socially distance yourself. Imagine that for just a moment. And if you've seen these refugee camps, you know that they are packed within a square inch. Also imagine if you are an immigrant in the United States and you don't have access to health care during this time or to affordable housing, and to be told to socially isolate yourself. So if we are taking a moment to imagine these conditions, I hope that it helps to illustrate the very challenging conditions that many immigrants and refugees face at the moment. And whenever I speak at events and conferences, I like to emphasize that life was already hard for many immigrants before the current crisis that the community is having with anti-immigrant policies and this crisis that we're going through at the moment. And it may make you think, why talk about immigrants in a fair trade conference, you know? And it's because the answer is pretty clear, right? Immigrants are everywhere. We are in the workplace, we're in agriculture, we're in manufacturing. And it's really an amazing gesture of solidarity that, and with deep appreciation for me that we are having this conversation with you, because for a long time, we have also siloed the conditions of immigrants. The United States has about 14% foreign-born population. That's about almost 45 million of this nation's population. And to make sure that given I'm not also able to share slides because we just pivoted to remote work this week, I wanted to focus on the California model because it's a very interesting model of what states can do to ensure that we create a system of protection, of inclusion, and really integration for the immigrant populations that live in our midst. I want to situate the California model, of course, in the context of this big global migration challenge that we're experiencing right now. You know, in the United States, there is a combination of racism, economic uncertainty, and political polarization that has placed migration and race at the center of political firestorms. There is a white nationalist and ascendant white nationalist movement that is committed to marginalizing people of color and immigrants. Because of conditions you've heard of, you probably have heard about children in cages, you know, the influx of more people seeking refuge into the United States because of multi-causal conditions like poverty, war, drug wars in the Northern Triangle, as well as really climate-induced migration, you know, to the point of our very inspiring speaker earlier. These multiple causes is fueling a new challenge in migration around the world. And it is very important, not just to the audience that we have today, who may or may have interactions with your governments or with your states, that we include a real intentional effort to consider the role of immigrant families and communities, the role that they play in our communities and in nation building. So how has California done on immigration, if we want to focus on a particular case study or model, so that we can illustrate what a successful and affirmative immigration strategy can be in the absence of a real fix to our immigration system? You know, California has not always been friendly to immigrants. Many of you who may come from California would probably remember that in 1996, we flirted with some real anti-immigrant measures that attempted to completely exclude immigrants from life in California. But we were able to turn that around, partly because it galvanized not just the farm worker movement in the state, but the immigrant rights movement to say, no, we are a state that's better if we include populations that call this state home in state building. We are lucky that we are also have become a rich, largely democratic and demographically ascendant state. And we have, over the years, been able to join together with other social movements to resource an immigrant rights movement that has helped to fuel great cultural, social, and economic mobility in our state. So I wanted to highlight that because you probably heard about certain programs that's been created in California. You know, we're talking about innovation in terms of pro-immigrant policies. California has taken the lead in many progressive immigration policies that are now laws, that is protecting and defending and expanding opportunities for many immigrants. This includes expanding access to healthcare for undocumented immigrants. Young people and children can now access comprehensive medical because of these programs. We've also allowed undocumented Californians to drive on our state streets and highways. And as of today, we have more than 1 million undocumented Californians driving on our roads. We've also created more protections for immigrants that are in deportation proceedings. And so the state, along with many advocacy organizations that work with the California Immigrant Policy Center, has created an infrastructure in which there's opportunity for immigrants that are under threat of deportation within our country's draconian immigration enforcement policies to have due process. It is not nearly enough, but it is a good model to look at in terms of how do you create an environment that is not about fear and marginalization and exclusion, but it actually an environment that says, we will work with these challenges with you so that we can focus on this project of making our societies better. We also have created a network of many, many other policies and programs that is helping to allow immigrants in our state thrive. Some of those examples that I shared with you, you can check that on our website, www.caimmigrant.org. And you will see that creating this kind of infrastructure is very helpful in facing the kinds of emergencies that we face now. And it is because when we build a strong system for everybody to thrive, we are able to respond with greater clarity, with more expediency, but also really with efficiency, because we don't have to create the systems arbitrarily. So now thousands of immigrants who otherwise would not have access to healthcare in California can have access, because we have created a healthcare system that is slowly beginning to include them. So I'm sharing the example of California just to illustrate that this is doable if we have the combined political commitment and political will to address what is otherwise a very intractable issue, because we have not been able to fix the brokenness in our immigration system. And it has really worsened in the last few years, because for Washington, D.C., rather than looking deeply at how we can fix the immigration system, we have decided to play political football with it. And now we are in a situation where the discourse on the subject is so bad. Well, at the same time, our moral anchor around it is really weakened. You know, when you allow a society that should otherwise protect vulnerable population to separate families and put children in cages, that is really a stark situation that requires a lot of support and solidarity, not just from within the immigrant rights movement, but from across sectors. This is, of course, compounded by the fact that our state is also dealing with multiple problems. And this is where we're encouraged that we are having a conversation with a different audience. You know, it's not just the immigrant rights community that is listening to us, and really appreciate that, because it's going to take multi-sectoral and a joint effort to look at and address many of the challenges that is facing migrant communities. In California, we are not only dealing with a very severe housing and homelessness crisis, but we're also now enduring the impacts of climate-related crisis. As you see, every year we have to deal with wildfires and their attendant consequences. And many immigrants are affected by these conditions. So what can we do? You know, what can we really do to continue to make sure that this effort to ensure that we're not working in isolation, we're not identifying solutions in isolation, is the example is this, right? Being able to listen to a diversity of stories, being able to connect with a diversity of movements, so that we have a bigger lens with which to view the intractable social problems that we are experiencing. Without this kind of deep solidarity, without this kind of reaching out to sectors that otherwise we wouldn't have heard of and we wouldn't have known about, some of these problems will continue to be outliers and will be treated as outliers until it's too late. So as I said, we're happy to continue to have this conversation online and offline in terms of really creating this holistic and comprehensive project around including immigrant and refugee communities in in creating a better society for all of us. Some of the examples that I shared with you are innovative policy solutions that is resulting to immigrants having a better life so that they can focus on other things like financial stability, like skills training and developing the workforce, because they no longer have to be constantly under the threat of this enormous fear of being separated from their families. So we hope that we can continue, we can hear from you, and you will be curious to hear about the work that we do in the state and the work that many of our partners are doing in California, because at the moment where we have this existential threat hanging over our heads, it doesn't mean that the problems and challenges of migration will stop. In fact, as economic conditions worsen from the impact of this public health pandemic, more and more people are probably going to move into greater poverty, and those conditions are also going to push them to move from where they live and move from the countries where they come from. And places like us, countries like the United States, that have traditionally received and welcomed immigrants, need to be able to prepare the infrastructure to continue to embrace not only the fact that we are a country that has embraced migration as part of what makes for our vitality, but also because it is the right thing to do. At this moment where we're reaching for deep solidarity, in the most ironic of ways, where we're being told to distance socially from each other, is also the moment where I hope we have the time to think about how interconnected our lives are, whether you are an immigrant or a refugee or not. So again, thank you for giving me the time and the opportunity to share our work with you. I look forward to continuing in deep solidarity with the fair trade community. Have a good evening and have a great conference. And I hand it over to our next speakers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Iris Madrigal, and I am the marketing manager for Covilli Brand Organics. Covilli Brand Organics is a grower and a distributor in the United States and Canada of 100% organic produce and 100% fair trade certified products. We are in a crazy situation right now, and we are as alone as we are together. So I will do my presentation hoping that wherever you are, you're safe and you're staying in quarantine. I was born in Mexico City. I was raised in Mexico, and I am a proud Mexican. Alex, my boyfriend 15 years ago, invited me to visit a farm. He's a second-generation grower and invited me to visit this farm in the state of Sonora in Mexico, in the area of Guaymas. Some of you might be familiar with San Carlos. So it's very close. The farm is about an hour away from the San Carlos area. And I came to visit, and I had great expectations about it. As I said, I was born in Mexico City. I was there until I was 14. And growing up as a city girl, I hardly ever had the opportunity to spend much time in nature, much less in a vegetable farm. So when I arrived, when we flew over from Mexicali in Baja into the state of Sonora, I had a great deal of expectations. What was I going to see? Was it a large farm? Was it small? What kind of vegetables? And how I was wondering mostly how things were going to be done. Within my Mexican cultural context, I wonder if I was going to find a lot of cut corners, or if I was going to find things were being done the right way. And to my very pleasant surprise, it was the second one. Everything was being done right from the get-go. No cut corners, no shortcuts. And I saw a farm, a company that strides in doing this. As time went by and I learned more about the company, I realized that it was the legacy of Alex's parents, Terry Perez, Susan Solis, and the third partner, Ernesto Moreno, that had built this company that started in the early 90s, so almost 30 years ago, and they did everything right from the beginning. It was, as I said, a very pleasant surprise to find this produce, vegetables grown in soil, whether on the open fields, in greenhouses or in shade houses, hundreds of workers diligently and with such expertise tending to the crops from seedling to harvest to packing. And it was an amazing experience for me, an amazing first encounter. And later on, realizing that if taxes needed to be paid, they were paid. Workers received all the benefits that they were entitled to. They get paid in a timely manner. They received the free housing with running water, with gas for cooking, within a safe environment. And as I said, it all spoke to me of integrity. And I realized that was the legacy that was left to this company by its founders. A few years later, Alex and I got married. I moved to Arizona. We had a couple of kids who are now 10 and 8. We have a little girl who's 10 and a boy who's 8. And after our son was 3 years old, he started insisting for me to come over and work for the company, which eventually I did. Due to my background, I had been able to work in getting a company or helping get a company certified in an ISO 14000. So knowing this, he wanted me to come over to Covilli and help with getting Covilli certified in fair trade. So we did. I got hired and we started with this process. We hunkered down like we are today, sat down for a couple of days, went through the whole standard in order to understand it and make it ours. It wasn't only a couple of people, it was the entire upper and middle management, because we really wanted to understand what we were going to be doing. So we became fair trade certified in 2015, which was an easy process because, as I said, things were already being done the right way. So it was little things that we had to fine-tune in order to get the company up to date, trickle down the information to the worker community, and so that everybody understood what fair trade was about and what the benefits were. In December of 2015, we get fair trade certified. But how did we decide to do it? To go 100% with all of our products, which are about 26 different products. Just like John Erb mentioned before, usually the way it works in the produce business is that only the product, only the commodity that the retailer, the stores request the grower to certify are usually the ones that get certified. The way we decided to do it was the other way around. And we certified everything. For this purpose, when a distributor offers fair trade product, the retailers or the wholesalers decide if they want to buy it fair trade or non-fair trade. And if they decide that they want, let's say, a couple of pallets of zucchini, then they will order it as fair trade. And it'll take a little bit of time because then the distributor has to call the grower and request those 2 pallets that has to be packed, labeled as fair trade certified, sent over in a truck, cross the border, arrive at the distribution center, and then get sent to that retailer or wholesaler. So that'll take a few days. We decided for the customers and the end consumers to have this product available as all the time. So we decided to certify all of our products and have them always available so that the customers could always find this in their racks. So if somebody wants non-fair trade product, that's when we make the special order. With this, by doing this, we became the first 100% organic and 100% fair trade certified company in North America. because all of our products are fair trade certified. The impact that we've seen, which is exactly what we were looking for, are 4 community projects that have been fulfilled thus far. The most important one, health clinic that is bringing access to general health and dental services to between 7,000 and 10,000 people. So not just our farm workers and their families, but the community where the farm is and the surrounding communities to the farm. We have 4 more projects in the works that will be fulfilled by the end of this year, by 2020. And it is our greatest pleasure to share with you that we have reached, in just 3 years of being certified, the amount of $1 million in fair trade premiums for community projects, thanks to people like you that support fair trade, that inform and are moving at a ground level, at a grassroots level, to share this good news with more people. With that, I don't want to go too much over time. I'll share the screen with Alex, my husband, and the president of Covilli Brand Advance.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. I'm going to try to make this quick, as we've already went over our time, I think, by like 9 minutes. And I first just want to say concerning Iris, that she's very humble and modest, and so she won't embellish too much on what she did, but it's really because of her that we're able to bring fair trade and make it a reality onto the farm. It took a lot of effort, a lot of time from the management teams, taking apart the program piece by piece, question by question, making sure that all of us, especially upper management, had buy-in into the program, because it was going to require a cultural shift from us all the way down to the workers and all the way back up. And so that's what we wanted to do. We both wanted, she and her in particular, wanted to make sure that our management team understood what this was all about, so they were also able to communicate that outward, not only to the working communities, to our worker community, but to other people as well associated with what we're doing. That being said, again, it wasn't an easy process. Fair Trade USA only asks us to do a certain percentage of interviews to do need assessments, like John Erb had been saying. We decided to go ahead and interview our entire workforce, which at peak season consists somewhere between 800 and 900 people, in order to get an accurate view of what the need assessment was. So I just wanted to quickly say that, because Iris she did a lot of work to get us to be fair trade certified, her and the entire team, but it was Iris that initially brought it down and broke it down for us. So I think there's value in calling her out on that. But why did we decide to do it the way we did? What Iris is saying, that we certified all the products. One is something, again, John Erb referred to, was trust. And so this program, from a worker standpoint, when you first start talking about it, it seems almost too good to be true. It's, wait a minute, you're telling me that somebody somewhere is going to buy this jalapeno, is going to buy this zucchini, is going to buy this eggplant, and I'm going to get directly some money because of that purchase that I'm going to control? No, that's not right. That's somehow they're going to take it out of our paycheck, or somehow it's not real. So I wanted to combat that, and the way of doing that was to certify everything 100% from the get-go, so that we could have that buy-in, so they could see, wow, look, over the course of a year, we generated all this premium. We could do all these things, to really get them thinking that this is a real thing. There's really people out there that care and that want to do their part. Secondly, I'm not new necessarily to the produce industry. Like I said, I'm a second generation. I grew up around it. I've been now in the company about 18 years. I went to UC Davis, graduated from there, and then jumped into the company right afterwards. And one of the things I noticed concerning fair trade, because we weren't the first to be certified fair trade in Mexico by any means, but I had a really privileged view. I was doing sales in the Nogales, Arizona side, and so I got to see the interactions between the different shippers and distributors and retailers and everybody in between, and the constant denominator that I saw was always misshipments, problems, just the nature of produce and getting produce across the border and everything that implies, and all the moving parts, and having to figure out if the truck's going to show up on time, if it did it, if they messed up the order at the packing house, if they received it wrong, if it got labeled incorrectly. So I saw all these things concerning the fair trade and people complaining all the time saying, well, I ordered some fair trade, but I couldn't get it, or they didn't have it, or they ran out of stickers or something. So when we began to look at it, my other calculation was we have to have it available. If we're really serious about what we believe and what we want to change, we have to make it accessible to the retailers. I really believe that the retailers hold a big key to all this. They have to buy in. And how does a retailer buy in? Is to make it available to them on a consistent basis, for them to be able to build programs around fair trade certified programs, to be able to write ads far out in advance, knowing that, hey, I'm not going to have to special order that. So that was a big plus for me, thinking we have to go 100% in order to make it viable, to make it a successful and accessible program to our retailers and wholesalers alike. But there are challenges with that. I'm not gonna lie. It's not all pie in the sky. We have to contend with market fluctuations, like John Erb said, an unstable marketplace. Sometimes, truth be told, the market will bear it. There is too much supply, not enough demand, and it's below our cost. But yet, that's our commitment. And those times, we as a company pay the premiums. We continue to sell fair trade. We don't shrink back from our obligation. Because we feel it's important. And eventually the market, comes back up, and hopefully at the end of the year, we pray that it all kind of it works out. And so far it has been working out because we have buy-in from our consumers, and we're starting to get that awareness. So our responsibility as producers and farmers is to, and I always view this as in the context of a social contract. I feel like it's both our parts, not just mine, not just the worker, not just the consumer, but it's all of us together. So our responsibility as producers and farmers is to constantly improve, to constantly innovate, to continually look for greater efficiencies so that we're able to pass that on, so that we're able to make it successful. And I also believe that there is a responsibility on the consumer side. And for me, that would be for the consumer to choose, to elect, to vote with our purchases for a more equitable food chain, which is what we're all working towards, and to help save this planet that we all share and we all live on. That being said, I'd just like to take a few steps back and talk briefly about our big picture and our hopes. Our hope is that we can be agents for change through something that connects us all, which is food. Our hope is that we can change our current food paradigm and work towards a more equitable food system that elevates farming communities across borders. Because at the end of the day, we're all connected, regardless of borders. We all eat. Somebody somewhere produces that. It doesn't magically occur at your grocery store. It doesn't magically come out from the storage in your retail store to the front of the store. There's people involved in our food system from top to bottom. And finally, our hope is that through fair trade, through programs like fair trade, we can all vote with our purchases. We can all vote with our dollars for the future that we all want. And that begins with awareness and with the work that fair trade campaigns does and people like you. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, the community of fair trade campaigns and grassroots movement. That's what it takes, awareness. So thank you for all the hard work that you do. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Let me just set this PowerPoint up. I hope everyone is doing well. I am coming to you from Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. We're currently on our second week of impromptu spring break while they migrate us over to online classes. So this is actually a fun little test run for me. Thank you all so much for tuning in and staying tuned in until the end today. And a big thank you to Fair Trade Campaigns, especially Kylie and Billy. They've done such a great job rolling with all of the changes that have happened. I went to the Fair Trade Conference the last 2 years, and it's just so surreal to be on this end of everything. So today I'm going to tell you about a trip that I went on to the Dominican Republic 4 years ago. It's a trip that really changed my life and introduced me to fair trade, actually, and then ended up leading me to start my own nonprofit. So as a junior in high school, I went on a service trip to the Dominican Republic to build houses and latrines for a week in communities called bateys. Before I went, I knew nothing about the bateys or the people that lived there, but on this trip, I saw the injustice of the sugarcane industry. The bateys that we went to are a little kind of around this area, if you can see my mouse. We worked with men who had been trafficked from Haiti to the Dominican Republic. They gave up all of their possessions, all of their money for the promise of a better future in the Dominican Republic. But once they arrived, their papers were taken from them and they were forced to work on sugarcane plantations for $3 a day, 6 days a week. They were only paid if they met their quotas. $3 a day is really barely enough for them to feed themselves, let alone the families that many of them have. Some of the younger men, like this one, have hopes to get out of the bateys in the future. Others want to help their communities and are trying to find out how they can do this, but still provide for their families. Older men in these communities that are still able to work have little hope for themselves or the future of their children, many of whom actually end up working on the sugarcane plantations themselves, since they are usually not considered citizens of the Dominican Republic, even though they were born there and have lived there their entire lives. While we're in these communities, we not only learned about the awful labor practices, but also about a specific population of people that most of us really just don't think about. Elderly men in these villages are laid off when they are too old to work. They're left without pensions and they become homeless without the housing that the sugarcane company provides. They're essentially stateless because they don't have any papers. They can't go back to Haiti, even though the preference of the Dominican Republic would be to deport them. Their neighbors usually end up taking them in, and they do their best to provide food for these elderly men along with their own families. On this trip with Rustic Pathways, our leaders explained to us that one way to combat forced labor, like we saw in the bateys, is to purchase fair trade. When I got home, I only ate fair trade sugar for an entire year. I told my parents about what I learned, and my mom started baking with fair trade products and only buying fair trade ice cream instead of the alternatives. I wouldn't even eat dessert if we went out to a restaurant. This seemed pretty drastic or difficult to a lot of people at the time, but I didn't think it went far enough. It took a couple of years after that, but in June of 2018, Humane, which was an idea hatched in the back of a van on a dirt road in the Dominican Republic, gained nonprofit status. The elderly men that I told you about have identified that their number one concern is food. This is why Humane was started. Humane's mission is to provide a sustainable and reliable food source for these men. This will not only help the individuals served, but also the families that are kind enough to take them in. It will relieve a little of the burden on these families and allow them to allocate more of their resources towards feeding themselves, their children, and even sending those children to school. Humane will also be paying women in the bateys to cook the food for these men, so they will have their own source of income, which many of them currently don't have because they're unable to work on the plantations themselves. Our reasoning is simple. Given the fact that 220,000 tons of Dominican sugar is imported to the United States each and every year, Humane aims to give back to the elderly former sugarcane workers in these communities who have provided us with the commodity of sugar for pretty much their entire adult lives. After all, sugar is a really integral part of the U.S. diet. By giving back to the men in these communities, Humane also aims to underscore the importance of fair trade products, sugar, or otherwise. Humane will feed 25 men in the Batey Monte Coco one nutritious meal every day. In order to do this, we need to raise $20,000 to fund our work in the DR for one entire year. And I'm happy to say we are currently about halfway there. Humane aims to help these elderly men by giving them one meal a day because they have sort of past the point of benefiting from larger systemic change that one day may come through movements like this one that we are all a part of today. I love this movement. I'm super passionate about fair trade, but there are people who we can help now who are sadly unable to benefit from fair trade. So we in this metaphorical room of ours have the capability to help these men and many others around the world by connecting fair trade with other means as well. At large, these people in the Bateys are taken advantage of by a system that we here today are trying to fight. This is why Humane takes fair trade so seriously, and through our own fundraisers, we not only seek to raise money for our work in the Bateys, but we also strive to promote fair trade and conscious consumerism more broadly. What I'm about to say is something that Alex started to talk about, and I'm sure is something that you will hear many times before this conference is over. But with each purchase we make, we cast a vote. Now, this vote could be for forced labor or polluting the environment or even a vote for child labor. But as consumers, we really have the power to stand up to companies that are mistreating our brothers and sisters around the world. We know that trafficking and forced labor is not unique to the sugarcane industry. It is prevalent in every industry you can name, from fashion and agriculture to the service industry and construction. As consumers, we can choose to vote for ethically made goods, artisan-made goods, goods that give back to different causes, companies that employ people with fair wages and also safe working conditions. We can even vote for sustainability, for goods that take less from our planet. If we can make fair trade the norm, then we will all have a very good chance at combating the systemic poverty that is endemic in communities like the Bateys. This is why, for our first big fundraiser, Humane organized an ethical fashion show and sustainable business marketplace to promote conscious consumerism. So many of the companies that I met or who sponsored the conference last year really made our fashion show and marketplace a reality last year. I cannot thank all of you enough, from Cause Gear and Alicia C. to Mata Traders, Mata Boomi, and Wholesome Sugar. There are so many of you that we really couldn't have done it without. I hope that some of you watching this today can be a part of our event this summer. Should all go well. Looking to the future, Humane hopes that by the summer, we won't have any more social distancing and we can hold our second annual ethical fashion show and sustainable business marketplace in Santa Barbara so that Humane can reach its goal and so that Santa Barbara can be a more conscious community. This Easter, also, if all goes well, Humane will be feeding 25 the 25 men we will be serving long-term an Easter meal. I was originally actually supposed to fly down to the DR for the event, but unfortunately, due to current situation that we have, and we talked about a little bit already, I can't go, but hopefully the situation there doesn't escalate meal program. I can't say that all of this has been an easy journey because it really hasn't been. It took years to get Humane recognized as a 501c3, and it has taken almost 2 years since then to raise the $10,000 we have now. It isn't easy to be a student and have a nonprofit and be on the board of Fair Trade LA and president of clubs all at the same time. But what I can say for sure is that is far, far easier than cutting sugarcane in the sun from sunup to sundown in the Caribbean humidity for 6 days a week for the better part of your life. We can really never forget the importance of the work that each of us is doing. And with networks like this one, we can all help each other to help others globally. For students looking to do more, I'm here to tell you that you can, and Alexandria definitely showed you that also. I hope we can all collaborate as we move forward to help each other realize our visions for a fairer future. Until fair trade becomes the standard, Humane will help as many of the elderly men and the potatoes as possible to have a higher quality of life. Here's my contact information and our website. Feel free to contact me about anything, to talk about fair trade, to talk about Humane, to talk about collaborating, anything at all. Shoot me an email. Thank you to everyone who has supported us so far, and thank you to everyone for tuning in today. We are on our way collectively to making a really big difference, and together we are Humane. Thanks. I'll send it back to Ben.
Awesome. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, let me just share my screen here. Well, really just one word to sum all that up is wow. From success stories of fair trade produce farmers to climate change activism to helping me figure out what the heck I'm doing in my 20s. This was really an incredible way to kick off this conference. So I want to thank all 9 of our speakers who really took the time to contribute their knowledge, their expertise, and their experience to making this a great start to the conference. I'd also like to take this time to thank and recognize all of our amazing sponsors, because without them, this really just would not happen. So of course, our presenting sponsor is Fair Trade USA, and we'd like to thank them for all the work that they do in the fair trade movement, as well as helping us pull off this conference. Our organizing sponsor is Simple Truth at Kroger. We'd like to thank them for their support as well. And we have amazing supporting sponsors who help pull everything off as well, them being Aramark, Chartwells, Gavina Gourmet Coffee, Numi Tea, which we all know and love, Wholesome Sweeteners, and Wholesome Produce. We'd also like to support and thank our advocate sponsors, Bon Appetit, the FTF, the Fair Trade Federation, Matarbumi, Patagonia, and Terra Thread. And finally, of course, our promotional sponsors who help us get the word out there and make sure that we are gathering as many fair trade advocates around the country and world as we possibly can. And our campus partners as well. These are the universities who are really making sure that we are pulling together a good, strong group of students from universities across the US. So I'd like to tie this up and wrap it up for you guys with what's happening tomorrow. So we are keeping this great momentum going. We have an awesome lineup for tomorrow. You'll notice that you can join one session from each of the 2 breakouts tomorrow. So when you go online, it'll be super easy. You'll see all 4 sessions that are happening at once. You pick the one that you want to join and you click join. So it should be that easy. As a reminder, these are the second group of breakouts that will be happening tomorrow night. So I'm super excited to keep this going for day 2 tomorrow. Thank you all for tuning in. I think it's certainly past my bedtime over here on the East Coast. So I am excited to check back in with you tomorrow and keep this all going. Have a great night, everyone, and thanks again.